Welcome back, everybody. This is Chapter 2 of Real Estate Principles, and today we're going to be covering estates, transfers, and titles. There's a lot of definitions in this chapter, so you're going to have to read this chapter probably more than once just to understand everything that it discusses. Today we're going to be going over estate ownership, acquisitions and transfers, title, and recording and acknowledgement. Okay, estates, interest share right or equity in real estate. So that's where the term real estate comes from. Varies from minimal right of a renter to the maximum right of full owner. Now, the way that you determine the amount of estate that somebody has or the degree of ownership is by these terms here: freehold estates, estates in fee, and life estates. So, you'll have to read up on all of these definitions so that you can understand what they mean. And there are also conditions that can restrict a fee estate. So, a condition precedent is something that must occur prior to property being transferred, and subsequent is something that happens after the property's transferred, which would create property to revert to grantor. So you'll see terms like grantor and grantee. Typically in real estate, um, the term that has or is the person giving the item, and the E, you can remember the double E at the end means receive. So you'll see several different terms end with or and E, and that's how you determine which party is which. Okay, life estate is just what it says. It's an indefinite period. It's during your life that you have all of these rights. Okay, less than freehold estate can be a estate for years, and that's a estate for a time period. I mean, it could be months or years. Period to period estate at will. Um, so estate at will is a rental agreement for an indefinite period of time, and then estate at sufferance or tenancy at sufferance is not an estate. And you can read up on that as well because the estate term has ended. Okay, part two, transfers. Uh, Transfers will cover any changeover ownership of property. Uh, Acquisition means to acquire, buy, pull in, while alienation means to transfer, sell, or push away. So when you alienate property, you actually sell the property or you release it to somebody else. Now there's 7 ways to transfer real property: deed, will, probate, intestate succession, accession, occupancy, and dedication. The most common one is by deed. And the word grant is in that deed, meaning you grant uh, the ownership to somebody else. And again, we'll see the or and the e. The or is a person granting the property. E is a person whom the grant is made, receiving the property. Okay, quit claim deed. You may hear people talk about a quit claim deed. All it means is I have no interest in the property. So whoever signs the quit claim deed is letting everybody know that this property is not mine. So any type of rights that you might have, you no longer have after a quit claim deed. Now, here are several types of deeds. Please read and understand what those deeds would be used for. And then here's an example of a grant deed and a quitclaim deed. Now, in order to be valid, deeds need 5 things. They need to be in writing, describe the parties, describe the property, contain a granting clause, an action clause, so what's happening to the property, and be signed by the grantor. So it does not need to be signed by the person receiving the property. As a matter of fact, they never are. And the second thing is it does not have to be recorded in order to be legal. However, if you have any type of loan on a property, that deed must be recorded. Delivery. Property is transferred until the deed's delivered with the intent of passing title. So there's manual delivery through recording and conditional delivery. So although it's not required that deeds be recorded, that's the normal process of delivery. Now, trust deed is not a deed but a conveyance. It gives bare legal title to a trustee with the power to sell. So, trust deeds in California are loans to finance homes. The word deed can cause some confusion. So, the actual trust deed isn't a deed, it is an instrument that's set up with a three-party system that you will read about in your. Okay, so there are two types of transfers by will, uh, and that means testate. So if you see the term testate, it means there is a will. If you see the word intestate, then there is no will. So witness will, there's witnesses to the will. Holographic means it's entirely handwritten. And codicil is a change in a will before the maker's death. And a revocable living trust is what I would recommend people obtain. So that way you stay out of probate court if you have a living trust. And we'll talk about that more later in the class. Now, if you do go to probate, that's when the court gets involved after somebody's passed away. This is lengthy and expensive. Well, more expensive than having a living trust. So even if you have a will, you will still go to probate court after the person passes away. Now, if there's no will, then it's intestate succession, and that's just the rules that the court uses to determine who obtains the property that's left behind. And then accession is natural causes. So you can gain land through natural causes by the moving of land by water and things of that nature. So it's just natural causes. So these are more like definition terms that you should know. So accretion and avulsion. You should read those definitions and understand. Occupancy or abandonment. So you can relinquish right of interest uh, by leaving and never again reclaiming the property. So think if you're a tenant and you just leave and you never come back, then you lose any rights to the property that you might have had. Now, adverse possession is an interesting concept because you can acquire property if all five of these things are met, although this is very uncommon. Now, an easement by prescription is a right to use somebody else's land. And by prescription means you obtain that right by 5 years of continuous use. And unlike adverse possession, prescription is a use of a property, not transfer of title. So you don't own the property, but you can use it. And then dedication, that's when wealthy people dedicate land for public cause. Usually, so for instance, universities and colleges are usually on dedicated land. Okay, forms of ownership. 6 ways to hold title. So severalty, even though the word severalty sounds like several, it means sole ownership. So that could be a little confusing. But ownership and severalty means there's only one owner. Tenancy in common. There could be multiple owners, or there is multiple owners, and you could have uneven amounts of possession and ownership, uneven interest, and uneven length of time. Okay, with that type of ownership. Joint tenancy has a right to survivorship, meaning if one of the people pass away, then their ownership's transferred to the other joint tenants. But they have to have title at the same time, obtain title at the same time, uh, all own equal shares of interest. So if there's two people, it's 50-50. If it's three, there's 33% with the three, and then all have equal right for possession. So that's the difference between joint tenancy and tenants in common. Is in joint tenancies, all these things have to be met. Okay, partnership, general partnership, and limited partnership. The difference is with a limited partnership, one of the partners only has uh, losses limited to the amount of investment. Where in a general partnership, the partners share all profits and losses. Community property is a married term. So a married husband and wife or can hold community property. And surviving spouse inherits property unless willed to an heir. And then all wages earned by either spouse during marriage are considered community property. Now, there is a blurb here that says do not advise a buyer on how to hold a title. And the reason for that is when you do that, you're almost acting as a lawyer. So you want to stay away from uh, giving legal advice because that's not what a real estate professional does. Now, this community property with the right of survivorship is a more current form of ownership. I think it's probably the last 20 years this has come on. Now, the difference between regular community property and with right of survivorship is transfer of ownership to the other spouse at death, and there are some income tax benefits to the right of survivorship. Okay, so forms of ownership. Recording. So that's the legal process of making an instrument an official part of the records of a county. So the county recorder's office does all of the recording. Documents that can or that have to be recorded are mechanics liens and declaration of homesteads. Grant deeds do not have to be recorded, but it's generally done in order to protect the ownership. Okay, so there is a priority of recording. Government liens and special assessments is at the top. Another person's prior rights, second, mechanics liens, and any agreements to the contrary is the lowest priority of recording. Now, when you close escrow, you'll hear this term, it's been acknowledged. That's a signed or verbal statement by the named person that they've signed the document to their own free will. And a deed does not have to be acknowledged to be valid, but it must be acknowledged to be recorded. So sometimes the terms acknowledged and recorded, they're kind of interchangeable terms. Notary public is a person that uh, applies their seal to a signature, and certain documents have to be notarized. So each seal has to contain the word notary public, the name of the county, name of the notary, state seal, and expiration date of the notary public's license. And then this is an example of the blurb that's on a notarized. Okay, so again, we'll stress that as a real estate salesperson or broker, you cannot give legal advice. So if the questions that your clients are asking you are of legal nature, you actually instruct them to find a lawyer because you don't want to get into that realm because you're not a legal professional. So that's not part of your duties as a salesperson or a broker. Okay, so that is all that we have for the second chapter. If you have any questions, just let me know. There's the discussion in Canvas that we can have, and also you can ask any questions that you might have on these items in our 1 hour meeting on Monday. Okay, thank you and have a nice day.